it up to questions first. If anybody has any questions about the film or about the work that Emily has been doing or the work that Dale does, go ahead and we can start that way. Anyone have any ideas? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Emily, I wonder if you're being embraced more in Berkeley than you were in Windsor.
So the question was, are we being embraced more in Berkeley than in Bertie? So the answer is yes. Maybe even more than we can deal with some days. So we have, you saw we had 13 students in a barn, basically, the first year. And we now have 216 students in 8th through 11th grade and 2 teachers and a girls program for 9 to 12-year-olds, which is a camp and after-school program. So, and that's all happened because of the partnership with Realm Charter School and them really giving us like free reign to grow our program with the support of the administration. And then also, I'm now in a position where I'm leading professional development with the other teachers at the school to implement design into the core subjects more. So yes, and it's overwhelming and like just wonderful, and the world is wide open. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Are they paying you?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I'm too old to be a volunteer for the, yeah. Oh, go ahead, and then.
Can I ask a question? I mean, I think the really sad part about that is not, the work you're doing is incredible, but how do you deal, from the lessons that you learned from the first project, the project that you saw, how do you deal with the decision makers who are so lack vision? How do you deal with that? What's the recommendation?
Yeah, even now I watch the film and I get super emotional and like really upset. But a friend and mentor of mine told me a long time ago that I'm not in the business of convincing, and really the farmers market, because it came from the students, I really wanted them to be the ambassadors. And in my mind, I figured, if they built this thing and designed it, like, how can you say no to that? And the school board members were not there at the opening. I don't think any of them have ever been to the farmers market. So there's only so much I can do. But what's more important for me is that the students really become the ambassadors and the voice and the ones making the case for the work. And that's part of the reason I love architecture and design, is because it's visible and there is a level of spectacle to it. So we do what we can, and we try to let the work speak for itself, and we let the students voice their own ideas. And if there's no convincing beyond that, then I don't know what else to do. But I think Realm, this new school we're at, is a perfect example where there was a lot of skepticism from the teachers as to what Studio H was and whatever, but in collaboration and in just building the relationships and doing the work, it's not a switch that's flipped, but it's slowly becoming something that is in the DNA of the school. Yeah. And there is a question.
Yeah. We're still in touch with almost all the kids. Judy and Neil, who run the farmers market, half of my Facebook feed is like posts from the Windsor Farmers Market. So they're like alive and well and thriving. The mayor every now and then, Mr. Hoggard. And Ron Wesson, the man that was talking about the importance of guy with the old truck. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a sense in town that there's like a core group of people that completely got what Matt and Emily brought to town and saw the value in that, and it's kind of inspired them, and the farmers market is thriving. The school district is another story. I mean, it's a little bit harder. I mean, that program doesn't exist there now, and it certainly is harder to get an idea like that past all of those barriers, as opposed to bringing it into a community and having the community embrace it, and by like utilizing the farmers market. There are, though, I mean, like Colin in the film, he is at NC State now, and he just got a scholarship from the Golden Leaf Foundation, and the requirement for him to earn the whole scholarship amount is that he returns to Bertie and starts a social enterprise or nonprofit. So And that's arguably, I mean, he was one of the highest performing kids in that class. So to know that he's going to be returning
Right.
to his hometown, the anti-brain drain, that he will be going back. I mean, that's a big thing, and I think that came out of the pride that he developed in doing this project, at least partially.
And I think that's true. And I think the other student whose story is kind of noteworthy like that is Stevie, the boy that lived on the farm that was carrying on the tradition of hating school. He actually also goes to NC State. He's the first in his family to go to college. He's studying agriculture, and he comes home on the weekends to work his farm. So he's another example of, you know, somebody who is so profoundly affected by that program and is not just taking it out of town, but now, you know, going to bring that kind of the knowledge and information that he is learning at college back into Windsor. So
Getting straight A's.
yeah, he just made the dean's list, which is really, really cool.
Oh, sorry, one other thing about the schools. I got an email recently from a woman who is starting a charter school in Bertie, and she's like, what is the deal with the school board? Like, do you have any tips? And I was like, good luck. Like, I don't know. But there is a little bit of conversation happening at a bigger state level about, with a lot of those rural districts, like, what is the problem? Like, why can't you get your you know what together? Like, seriously, what's the deal? And there are some charter schools and some other outside entities that are putting pressure on the school districts to either get it together, or like, we're gonna have to provide some other options. So you know, that's not, our program doesn't live there, but I would like to think there is becoming more awareness and some irreverence as to like how deeply rooted the. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. How hard was it to get the students to engage in design? You know, for some of them it was like pulling teeth, but it's kind of like what I was saying before, that once they see it and once it's like in their hand, like, I built that model and I'm gonna build 50 more. And I think Dale can speak to this also, this is the power of making, that there's like, once it's in your hand and your hand built it, you wanna do it more. And that's something a math test cannot give you, because in design, there's no right answer or wrong answer, there's just production. And so initially when I said to the students, build me 50 models, they're like, are you crazy? Can I just take a test and get a grade and forget what I learned? But then they start building the models, and they start to understand, like, this isn't bad or good, it's just something to critique and to incrementally improve. So for a lot of them that just don't do well in like the test, drill and kill traditional classroom, it became like a really exciting thing for them, because it was permission to fail, permission to try new things, and that we would always support them as long as they were making. Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me. I think you're a hero. It's just what you've done is heroic in its effort. It really is. And just a couple of reflections I have from watching the movie. One just wonderful movie, just to get this out and tell this story, because we need more people to see it and understand it. But you know what it demonstrates, whether it's rural or in the midst of an urban area, we have so much talent in these young people that we're missing, that we don't develop and that we don't recognize. And you know, you take anybody who walks in and you develop something as wonderful and beautiful as that. And you have to believe that's the potential of everyone, right? But they're not getting that opportunity. They're not getting access to mentors and to facilities. And it's just tragic, you know, and what they're getting in its stead is miserable, right? It really is cutting off opportunity for them rather than creating it. And I think it's really powerful to see it take place in a rural area like this. So, you know, it's sadly that question that was asked earlier is we don't, I think, look enough at the personal development of students, and we ask, you know, did they fit through these arbitrary doors? But it really is so moving to see what happens inside these kids as they develop, and what you and Matt did was just, as I said, just heroic.
Good, Ron. So the question is about how we heard about Emily and Studio H and the work they were doing and how we actually made the film, because we're based in Los Angeles. My partners on this project are my husband, Patrick Creedon, who's the director, and my producing partner, Neil Baer. And it was actually Neil who read a book that Emily wrote called Design Revolution, 100 Products That Empower People. And he read the book, was completely fascinated, hunted Emily down on Facebook, and connected and said, this is an incredible story. And you know, it just happened to be at the time when Emily was getting ready to go to Bertie to start this program. So that was very lucky that we connected at that moment, because it was kind of like a window of opportunity. So that we started the film right when they started the program in July of 2010. Went down there without any funding, really, just with a camera to see if there was a story, to see if the community would be open to it, to see if everybody would be willing to participate. And over the course of really the next 2 years, made trips down, probably 10 trips, maybe at 10 days, 2 weeks a span. And then we had, in the classroom, as you see in the film, Jamisha, who became our sort of like local documentarian. So a lot of the footage was captured by her, and Emily certainly shot a lot as well. And then we had a director of photography down there during the summer that they built the farmers market. So it was a lot of, you know, we were just sort of like following the progress of the program, and we got really close to everybody involved, because it was like we kind of were all in it together. So it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, so Dr. Z is like my, I don't know, like my spirit animal, like, I don't know, godfather. He's like, yeah, we wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for him. So he sent me, this is like in February 2009, he sent me a cold call email, and he said, I'm a superintendent in this rural district that I never heard of, area code 252. I'm like, where is that, Europe? Like, I had no clue, and he said, so he had been brought in essentially to fix the school district, and he had seen a previous project that we did called the Learning Landscape, which, is there an image of that in the film? It's this, it's a playground made out of reclaimed tires, where kids can learn like math or all kinds of core content through gameplay. So we had built a couple of those playgrounds, and he saw it published on a design blog, and he referenced it. I'm like, what kind of superintendent reads a design blog? But like, that's amazing, and I want to work with this guy. So he said, you know, I love what you guys do. Would you come down and basically do whatever you want, build some learning landscapes, help us bring design into this school district? And so for a year before we started Studio H, we were working there off and on. We built 3 computer labs, a weight room for the football team, 4 learning landscape playgrounds. And Studio H emerged out of our relationship with him, and seeing that, you know, we were building facilities and working with teachers and students, but the process of design really needed to be in the classroom. So the idea for Studio H grew very much out of Dr. Zollinger's vision and his willingness to like embed us in the school district. And he's now in Houston. He's the assistant superintendent of the Houston Unified. He was not at the opening, even though we invited him. He I don't know that he would go back to Bertie at this point.
He kind of shakes things up.
He
and
burned a lot of bridges. When we first started working there, he said, I just want you guys to know I have like a 2-year shelf life, and then I'm going to piss someone off, and I'm going to be gone. So that's kind of his shtick, you know, like he's the mixer-upper, and then he is gone. But no, we're very grateful to him for everything he did. Yeah, I love and hate this question because I never have a good answer. So Dale and I were talking about this yesterday, like the weird tension that we feel, where we as an organization have had a good amount of success with the program, and now we're at 216 students, which is like, doesn't sound like a lot, but that's how many kids I see every day, and it's like, yeah. So
it feels like we've already scaled up a lot, but we're still only in one location. So the tension for me is, how do I take the successes that we've had and scale it without it becoming either watered down or so far removed from our relationships with the students that it's not meaningful anymore. Because even though I'm, the executive director and I have to write grants and whatever, like, I see those kids every day, and that's what keeps the work really meaningful for me, and that's what helps me understand like what we're doing well and what we aren't. So I don't ever want to get to the point where I'm like managing 50 franchises. But one thing we are doing is we just are in the process of launching a new website that is taking our 250 lesson plans, units, readings, videos, etc., and just like making them available to everyone to search through and use. I'm trying to get the developer to put a button on the side that says download the entire thing. It'll be like 8 gigabytes. But we want to be transparent and say, like, we did this and it totally failed, but please try it and make it work. Because a lot of the work is really context specific, and that's really an important part of design. So I'd like to find a happy medium where we can make what we do available and easy to adopt without me having to become this like weird puppet master disconnected from my own students. Yeah. Do you want to comment on that? You had some.
Well, no, just that we talked about it yesterday. It was just, there's something about building a really good model and continuing to develop that, and versus just focusing on replication of that. And there's, it's like you said, a tension there, but a lot of things do get judged today. Is it replicable across hundreds of thousands of people? And truth is, we don't know how to do a lot of that. I mean, you can rubber stamp things out, but it takes a real commitment, and takes people that really want to do this, and it isn't formulaic. So, but I think I recognize we had that in a meeting yesterday of just some people were asking, how do we get this to Atlanta, right? And and even then, you'd say you'd want it not just in one school, but in many. So it's tough. Wendy in the back. Yeah. Yeah, so Wendy who's talking at 1:30 today is Swap Rama. In some ways, Maker Faire is like that too. We've created a model for that and allow other people to take that model. There's some guidelines on how to follow that. But education is also, a challenge too. But it's a good idea, one to really think about. Gene?
I just wanted to share a non-view with my wife and I were in East Bay Area Thursday and saw charter school and independent school take Maker movement and make a core of their school. And it works beautifully. So I encourage you to replicate it.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a great story, but
Right.
you're gone and then what happened to all the kids? It needs to take a scale. Change our country.
So I do think that like Matt and I are very different kinds of teachers too. Like, we didn't go to credential programs. We really know nothing about classroom management, as you saw. And we have an expertise outside of the typical core subjects. So I'm also interested in scale by staffing. Like, how can you train a different kind of teacher to be in the classroom, but to do something like audacious that a traditional classroom teacher wouldn't necessarily think to do? And additionally, I work with 35 teachers at Realm, some of whom are like 15-year veteran teachers and have been doing the same curriculum every year, and they're really good at it. But then when you say, throw that unit out, come meet with me for an hour, we're gonna like blow it out, and you're gonna do a flash mob instead. They're like, what is going on? So I think there's an opportunity for scale by professional development also.
So, and that's what we know from this is whether it's makers or it requires people.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
something that's passed on person to person and getting really good people to do it. It isn't something where you can throw up an app and it happens. And a lot of people, I think, in education today want technology to play that role of scaling, and this is not something that lends itself. There are parts of it that can be, I think, informationally managed, but not the creative part. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest. I mean, you do a summer camp for girls as an example, but we had the Maker Education Initiative did Maker Core, and we trained college-age students and deployed them in 35 host sites around the country, like Boys and Girls District clubs, science centers and community centers and things. And it is a matter of you can fit that in. And ideally, some of it, like you use the word seed in your documentary, it does help to start seeding the educational system, and things start to get brought into the education system. But we still have to fight to get into the center. That's really important. I mean, the transformative experience those kids have wouldn't have happened, I think, if it was just an hour or two a week. So, getting them, the hardest thing is to get kids for a substantial block of time where they have the opportunity to develop and create and iterate. I don't know why I'm calling.
I wonder if the professional development model also needs to start with the leadership of schools and school boards, for instance, because I lead an independent school here in Atlanta, and if I were to only allow or ask, a couple of teachers and scale up only to or within a certain grade level, I'm not sure that my school as a whole is really going to experience a transformation if only a couple of grade levels and a couple of teachers are really taking on the idea. So in some ways, I wonder if there is both a top-down and bottoms-up movement here that we really need to think about, where leadership in schools need to really understand how to transform the school purpose and the mission of the school itself.
Yeah, I think the big sell to a lot of school leaders is going to be through the Common Core. That, like, if we can very articulately describe how we can teach to the Common Core standards through design better than we could through regular instruction, like that, because a lot of states that either have switched over or are switching over. Unfortunately, most teachers care more about the standards than design. So,
But a lot of it, I wonder if it's because the leadership is also perhaps putting a focus on the Common Core as opposed to more audacious goals.
Yeah, but I'd say the challenge is, I mean, you saw the school board there. I mean, how much leadership training, would have mattered to them, right? I mean, you're often fighting with people that have just a different mindset, and I'm much more, with the maker stuff, feeling like we've got to work at the grassroots level. I think parents are important, getting them. We get a lot of requests, hey, will you come talk to parents at our school? Because they can motivate those leaders to change. But I think the biggest drivers of change are going to be the kids themselves. I mean, that's why we're doing Maker Fairs. We get the kids there, they want to do it, they start asking for it in school, and they know it's not there. And I think that does move its way up eventually. I mean, it's happening here at Georgia Tech, where students want to do this kind of stuff, and they're trying to adapt to keep up with it. Lots of questions.
yeah, in fact, I don't know if it mentions this in the film, but we had a community college partner, Pitt Community College, and so our students earned 17 college credits over the course of that year. And that community college was really forward thinking. They're like, we love this, like, can you do this at our school as a vocational program? So I think there's a interesting moment, like when those kids graduate or don't graduate, what's their stepping stone to the next thing? So I have thought about it a little bit, but I've just been so entrenched in the K through 12 stuff. It hasn't really been something we've explored deeply. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously biased because I'm obsessed with architecture, and I think architecture has this like secret weapon that to drive past a construction site where the construction crew are white, black, male, female, 16-year-olds, and me as the forewoman, you're like, what is going? There's a spectacle. There's a scale and a spectacle that architecture has, and for the kids to then stand back and be like, that thing is huge, and I built that. That's just pretty unparalleled to me. But absolutely, I mean, that's part of design for me, is also finding the thing that you love and going for it. Like Jamisha, for the first 2 months, she was like, this sucks. Why am I playing with chicken poop or cow poop or whatever? Like the stuff we were making her do was just not interesting to her. And then she picked up a font book, this 1,000 fonts book, and she saw some lettering, some like bubble lettering that she loved, and she's like, is this a thing? Like, do people do this for a living? And then she was like really into typography. So that's also on us to find the thing within design that is like the thing that lights them up. But I mean, I've like Neil, there's some programs in film and photography, and I don't know about theater, but all kinds of different media that are remarkable.
And I also think it's the idea of design thinking. You know, I think Emily's the first person to say that the objective was not to turn each of those kids into architects or builders. It was about learning in a different way than they'd been taught, you know, to that point. So the idea that you can be in a maker space or creative space or a lab or and try something out and make a mistake and make a mess and not be told that that's wrong, but instead be told, like, well, you know, what else can you do here? Or why don't you work with this person? Or, you know, think about it differently until you get to the point where you have something that you're happy with and satisfied. I mean, that really is like the maker movement, as I understand it. And I think that the idea that this kind of process brought into education can be applied, as you say, in any discipline. It doesn't have to be about building something. It's except maybe building confidence or you know, building kids, their ability to think for themselves and sort of work through problems.
I just may add on here just quickly is I think a lot of what kids are doing in school is sort of absorbing something, and they're not doing anything with it. So I like to think of it as like, it's not what you know, but it's what you can do with what you know. And it's getting them to apply it. And it's if you're creative, particularly you want to develop creativity, you have to act on it. You can't just like allow it to, you know, like fester in your head. So, and the other thing I think that's important about this, whatever words we use to describe it, is actually engaging the kids' minds and bodies, not just, I think that we can abstract knowledge and just impart it. I think of education as much more experiential and being completely engaged. You don't know whether it's your body or mind that's working in this and building a building or making a robot or any of these things. And you know, certainly it applies to things that are digital and other kinds of creative forms. But what I feel like is missing in school is the engagement of the physical, again, the physical bodies of the students and the physical space around them and the physical sense of tools and materials.
Yeah, and that's kind of the basis of good project-based learning. But then even project-based learning becomes really siloed to like the math class is doing this and the English class is doing this. And so one of my big dreams for Studio H is that like maybe we become our own school someday, and your 7th grade experience is this year-long project and you're learning every single core subject through that. So if it's a farmer's market, you know, maybe you're reading, I don't know what, like, you get where I'm going with this. But to, like you said, like to have the point of relevance be applicable to all those subjects, and because it is so siloed, and that's one thing that I have to commend Realm, the school that we're at now, for is every teacher is required to do cross-disciplinary collaborations every semester. They're required to teach units through design projects. I mean, you walk into that school and there's like stuff everywhere, and you don't know what class it's coming out of. But yeah, that's something that's not really encouraged. It's definitely not taught in any credential program. I asked our 35 teachers who had a unit in their credential program about project-based learning, and 2 of them raised their hands. And I said, tell me about what they taught you. And they're like, well, it was a reading and like a week of, I mean, it was nothing, you know. So there's also a problem in the way that we're training educators, that they're not coming out of their own professional training with any interest in or training to do that kind of teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be very few opportunities in school to have sort of integrated learning across across lots of subjects. And I thought you did mention that really well, that architecture could be one of those places.
To your point about
Right. We end up we end up creating a lot of extrinsic reward systems to get kids to do something we want them to do, instead of figuring out what the intrinsic motivations are that get them to do things that are relevant to them.
I think do we have one last question?
Yeah.
Did you want to ask something?
So as far as the grant writing experience, I have none. I just kind of figured it out and got lucky. And most of the grants that we got, so we've been supported for 5 years from the Adobe Foundation. The Kellogg Foundation specifically funded the Farmers Market. Autodesk, Milwaukee Tools, and Lincoln Electric are our tool sponsors, and then the National Endowment for the Arts. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the National Endowment for the Arts is recognizing, or has recognized, this problem. I don't know if you were going to talk about that, but they are seeing the need for private, corporations or foundations to help support some of these programs, because, like you say, it's just not recognized, and so they're not getting the funding that they need. So I think that's something that is sort of new, and they're very excited about being able to put different programs together with partners that you may not know are interested in supporting this kind of learning. So
I would also say though, like we're not well funded at all. Like I list those grants, and like we have our budget last year was like $130,000. So I say that not as like a sob story, but also for our students,
we're really transparent about that. Like when the last scene of the film where we were building the shipping container classroom, like that was a Kickstarter campaign that our students, like we raised $15,000 as a Kickstarter campaign, and that was part of the design project for them. Like, this is what we need. We're super constrained. Like, how are we gonna make it work? So I also make that financial constraint a part of the learning process for them. I'm not gonna go ask them to raise 15 grand, but I want them to understand, like, design is about constraint, and that's on me, that's on them, and it's all about how we figure it out together. And I try to be really transparent and vulnerable, like, I have to go home and write this grant, and we're all like in this together. So there is also this goes back to Dale's comment about it being grassroots. You know, I don't see the Gates Foundation walking in and giving me a $3 million check tomorrow. So knowing that, how do we just keep growing it and growing it and growing it to the point where it hits a terminal velocity and the students are involved, and then we have some kind of inertia, and maybe we get there. But the crowdfunding and the like low level grassroots making it work is always going to be part of who we are, and I think that's in the maker spirit very much.
Yeah, I agree. I just, you know, the one idea I think you learn a little bit from Emily, making things kind of visible. Really, sometimes I think people that start schools and things need to do more about telling that story and getting it out there, and doing things like recruiting support from the community, asking for help, not just from the parents maybe that are there, but the broader community, and getting them engaged. Some of the things that we see with maker spaces get started once you start letting the community know. Someone shows up with, hey, my grandfather passed away and I have a garage full of tools, I'd like to donate them to the school. So, and on the testing thing, obviously this is kind of, the junction of American education today, and we just have to fight it. I mean, fight it in every way we can. But I will bet that your kids will do fine on those scores, and like partly is just don't stress over that part, generally that might take, I've heard enough examples of schools that sort of go in other directions, and they do the testing and the kids are fine. But you're not getting sucked into teaching for the testing, you're teaching for what matters to kids. And we just have to fight this. It's going in the wrong direction, but I think it can't go there forever, and I perceive it changing, that people are coming to making and things like this because they know, and even teachers, they look and say, what are the kids engaged? No. It doesn't really matter what standards we have if the kids are bored and they're not paying any attention to it. We can talk all day long, and we know it doesn't have any impact. So I think changing the nature of education, making it much more active and engaging is the key part of it.
I think that's a perfect way to leave it.
Okay.
We'll be around if anybody has any other questions.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.